if I look at my life as a widow and taking those Hindu cultural norms and actually what's subjected on
Mhm.
Hindu women in India, it's very different. It's a different
Yes.
story. But I choose to be like this, and for me, it's my way of just marking what's happened to me in life.
Sure, sure. Well, and that is a unique way to carry on someone's legacy, and as the title of the magazine is celebrating, life. So it's celebrating him and that unity that you had together. And I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, I can't think of a nicer way, making it your own, but yet still honoring because you loved him. I'm getting verklempt. So knowing what research I've done with the ladies in India, lucky you to be in Kenya because it just seems, I mean, nobody, it's if you're, unless you're there and unless you study it or unless you experience it or know it for a fact, it is just sad. I mean, they
Yeah.
get shoved into the oust. They're just thrown at some temple and okay, go live your life and be you. Bye bye. Wear the white, cut your hair, and just exist until you die. But it seems like that's the sad side. What happens to the men? Like, do they get to carry on? Because you said it is a patriarchal system. Sucks to be a woman, but kudos to a man, apparently. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. You talk about it in India, and lucky I'm not in India, but actually, India is a very divided between the rural and the urban. So you'll find that in rural areas, widows are seen as cursed and they'll not be allowed to go to celebrations, and they go through all this rigmarole of white saris, etc. In the urban cities such as Mumbai and Delhi, things are changing. Young, independent women are saying, no, this is not good enough. I don't want to be that person. And you can't dictate to me what I wear and etc. But it's changing. It's changing very slowly. There's still a lot of stigma around being a widow in India, and I think that's just years and years of culture
Mhm.
and religion. But the only people who can change it are women themselves. It has to be women supporting women, widows supporting widows. But even in the Indian culture here in Kenya, there is stigma around being a widow, and I think when you are a widow, that you might be seen as cursed. You're not invited to weddings. You're not invited to celebrations, and that also happens in England. I work. An ambassador for a charity called Widowed and Young in the UK,
Okay.
and Widowed and Young is for people 51 and below who've lost a spouse, a partner. You don't have to be married. You can have children. You may not have children. You can be of any sexual orientation. As the thing is that you have lost somebody that you love, your other half. And as an ambassador for that charity, I talk to a lot of widows in England and the UK in general. And there are Indian widows there who go through it. This is a developed country with women who are working, and even then, their in-laws will put certain stipulations on them that you can't go out, you can't date again, you can't marry again, you are our daughter-in-law. So what happens is we find that women around the world, and this isn't just true of Indian culture, huh? I've seen it here in Kenyan culture and African cultures. So here there's a practice in a certain part of Kenya where widows are taken and sexually cleansed, which means they have to sleep with another man to show that they're sexually cleansed, and they have to sleep them without a condom. So things like HIV is a big
Mm.
deal. And again, we look at all these systems where uh, widows are taken and subjugated in some way,
Mhm,
and it's
mhm.
because it's such a patriarchal thing. So when I talk about Hindu widows, I think we need to look at it and see actually it's not just Hindu widows; it widows around the world
Mhm.
are probably one of the most vulnerable and least talked about demographics in the world. And there's another foundation in UK called the Lumba Foundation, which I work sometimes with. And we talk about this. We say that there are something like 260 million widows in the world, of which 40 million of them are living in abject poverty. And we're not talking about this demographic. They're a
Mhm,
hidden demographic. They're
mhm,
not a demographic that governments want to talk about
mhm.
because they can lose. They don't just lose the most important person in their lives,
Mhm.
They lose their identity because suddenly you're no longer that person's wife. They
Mhm.
lose that you become just his widow, or his children's mother, or his parents' daughter-in-law. They
Mhm.
sometimes lose their children because the in-laws take them away. They lose their right to inheritance. They lose their right to a job. So
Mhm.
they lose not just the most important thing, but everything.
Mhm.
And then you see the men. And if you look at Indian men are told, okay, time to move on, go find another woman quickly, get married, and you need another woman to look after your children. So they are encouraged to move forward much faster. And women are told, that's it, your life is pretty much over. And the and one of the things as a widows activist is that I find that just that double standard, first of
Right.
all, the way widows are treated awful, but that double standard equally bad. So we are we shouldn't be treated like that.
No, no, definitely not. And I have a friend who I knew her husband when we had moved away from here in Florida, and then unfortunately two of friends of mine, their husbands passed away. Um, the one, it was cancer, and it came back and couldn't be helped, unfortunately. And I mean, he had lived a great life, and together, she had found a new partner because she had been married before, and so it was like their second. And they were going strong and living life and creating, work and doing things together. It was a really beautiful relationship, and she feels that friends were the thing to go. Like, she's this very intellectual woman. She's worked in various situations. Even when the Columbine thing happened, which has been mass shootings, first real kind of like mass shooting around the United States that happened with the children at schools, like she was in that. She was up and involved because of her expertise in suicide. Um, and she just, over time, she's recovered. She's dated again. It's been a little interesting there. But and so the one thing she's told me is like, okay, now I want to get back out there because friends just seem to go poof. And I was like, really? Because like in my head, I'm like, well, obviously you're a couple and you go couple out together sometimes, but I can't imagine that they abandon her. But apparently they have.
Yeah.
And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me that people just go
It's a
poof.
Yeah, it's a very common thing, and it's something that people talk a lot about. I was very lucky because I had a lot of friends who knew me and Jeremy very well, and then they actually rallied around me. So I was very lucky that way. But there are many reasons for that. So one of the reasons is when you there's an awkwardness if you have always invited Jeremy and Charlene, and then and we're a couple here and we're a couple, so it's six people, and then suddenly now it's just Charlene, and she's going to feel awkward about not having Jeremy there. So instead of dealing with it, they just don't invite you. There's also a huge school of thought that a young widow is always on the prowl. So if she's going to be after your husband. And so that's a big concern for many women. So they don't want other women who are now single in their minds to be around their husbands. So they just don't invite you. So I know a lot that's not unusual, and it's something I've heard again and again. A lot of Jeremy's friends rallied around me, and a lot of my friends rallied around me, and then a lot of our friends rallied around me. But I also pushed them away. So sometimes that's from us pushing people away. But yeah, it's not uncommon for your circle of friends to completely change.
And that's kind of sad. I guess there's some kind of weird human psychology in that. I'll have to look into that in the near future
Mhm.
because I felt for her because we were out of town. So I was just like, we didn't come back or anything because we were close, but we weren't that close. And so when we did move back, and then I did, hey, how are you? We reconnected, and that's become a conversation she had with me. I was like, it didn't register up here, but I'm gonna look into that further because that seems unfortunate in its own
Mhm.
way. Now another thing I noticed that's unique about you, besides your insane busy schedule between your dance schedule, which looks fun as all get out, and I can't think of a better way to, get yourself happy because music, is in my last is in this October issue is a minor topic. I want it to be more, but in future I'm hopeful, and hopefully I can engage you again in that regard, because music seems to really, I mean, it can shift you in such a way. It's wonderful and crazy how that works. And I guess that's, I mean, that's kind of one of the ways that you found some healing is through
through my
music
dance.
slash dance. Okay.
Yeah, through my dance for sure. So, in fact, when Jeremy died, the only reason I left the house for a whole year was for 3 hours of dance class every week that I was teaching, and that kind of became my lifeline. And now I don't teach dance as much here in Kenya since COVID because all the gyms and all are shut. But that is the plan to eventually. I teach a lot more mindfulness on Zoom at the moment.
Mhm.
But I do, interestingly, talking about music, I do a radio show here called Mindfulness, Music, and More, where I get a guest on and we talk about their mental health journey. So it might be somebody with a disability, or somebody who's gone through widowhood, or somebody who's tried to attempted suicide, or somebody who's gone through depression. So every week it's somebody different. And they all are asked to choose 5 songs that mean something to them. And it's really interesting what kind of songs they choose. Some of them will be something that reminds them of something, or but more often than not, it's something that's uplifting and makes them happy. And I'll say, so why have you chosen this song? And they'll say, I don't know, it just makes me happy. Or I danced to it all the way through Corona because we were locked up and locked, in
Right.
lockdown and stuff. So it's really interesting how powerful music is. With dance is adding that extra element. You have the music and then you've got the movement as well. And movement, if you look at it energetically speaking, will release dark energies, because when you are moving, you are releasing any energy and
Mhm.
pent up energy within you. But also, with that exercise, you're releasing things like endorphins in your body, which is then making you feel happy. So there are so many reasons to bring exercise in, but for me, dance is a very special way of exercising because it has that music element as well.
I was watching some video, and then I was watching some of the stuff you've done recently for, or it could be recent, it was recent for me visually, for the children, and showing them how, like an elephant and the movements and the demonstrations. And that was really cool. And personally, I don't like to sweat a lot, which I don't know, I live in Florida, but, and I burn up like a Krispy Kreme donut. So I'm not really outside a lot, and so that the movement seemed doable from a low key, I don't like to sweat aspect. I was like, yeah, this is something I should look into, because clearly, you know, and as people experience, whether young or old, and especially older, I mean, look at all the people that do Tai Chi, I mean, it's amazing how they
Exactly.
just continue. I mean, they just, and it seems to focus you. It seems to, get you going for the day. It really seems like a great way to move past things, to move forward in your life and to carry forward.
Well, Tai Chi is a form of mindful movement. So, mindfulness is obviously one of the key ways of uh, building. So, in my book, Happiness is It's Simply a Mindset
Mhm.
Shift. Mindfulness is one of the 10 techniques. I share 10 techniques on how I have built happiness and resilience in my life. Just trying to find the book. Um, so, so that's my first book, Always with
Okay.
You, and that's Jeremy.
Hmm.
So it's a memoir about our love story. And then my second book is an online dating at 40. I was looking for happiness in a man.
I
So I
saw
went
that.
crazy
Yeah.
for 7 months. And
Yeah.
then when I realized I couldn't find happiness in a man, I started creating happiness for myself. And then I
Okay.
rewrote my third book, Happiness is Simply a Mindset Shift. And in this, I do 10 techniques. And one of them is dance, one of them is eating well, sleeping well. So your body is really important. You have to nourish your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Mhm.
And mindfulness is a really key way of nourishing your mind and your brain, and actually living in the present moment. And because what we tend to do is we live with all these regrets of the past or
Mm.
fears of the future, and you can't really do anything about the past. Yes, you can remember, perhaps you can learn from it, you can enjoy the memories that are good, and you can learn from memories that perhaps aren't good either, but you grow as a result of your past. Your future, you're not there. You don't even know if your future. I don't know whether I'm going to wake up tomorrow, I might have die in my sleep, or I might leave the house and get hit by a bus. I don't know what tomorrow brings. So at the moment, all I have is this moment right now talking to you. And this is the most important thing in my life at this moment. Nothing else should matter. What's on, whether what I'm going to have for dinner in half an hour shouldn't matter. My next appointment in 2 hours shouldn't matter. What should matter is this moment. But we are so used to thinking ahead that we don't know how to live in the present moment. So what mindfulness does, and I see it very much as a training method, is to train your mind to be present now. And you can do that in various ways. You can do that by meditation, which is a formal way. You can do it through mindful movement, which dance, tai chi, pilates are all yoga, are all mindful movement. You can do it by sitting here with a cup of tea and just focusing on that cup of tea and seeing what the smell and the taste and the feel of that tea is, and training your brain. And that's all mindfulness is. And I'm not saying don't plan for the future. You
All
must. You
right,
must
right.
look at it financially. You must look at it if you have children. You must think, okay, what am I going to do in a week, a year,
Mhm.
maybe even 5 years, if that's how far. I don't plan that far. I'm lucky if I plan a month ahead.
I know.
Yeah. So because every time I plan, a curveball comes my way. So I've stopped planning. And actually it's quite fun this way. But I have to still plan
Sure,
something.
sure.
But I can only plan for the future if I'm absolutely clear about my present. And unfortunately, we have so much stress and anxiety and depression around our present that we
Mhm.
can't plan clearly because we don't have clarity of mind. So the first thing I would say to you is have that mindful present awareness now, 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 and everything else will fall into place.
So true, so true. And I was thinking about that before this call, actually, and it was just like, I know, having gotten laid off because of COVID, it shifted quite a few things. Some things you thought were going to be there for quite a long time. And then, sitting and stopping and focusing shifted me in this direction, which was a direction I never thought would happen. I'm a creative. I was like, I need to own my creativity. I need to be more mindful of my creativity and actually stop being ashamed of it. For some reason,
Mhm.
you know, because my parents are old school. I'm sure, as get a job, get out there, do certain things that are expected of you. And I didn't do parts of what weren't expected. And then, the expectation of get that right job, do that right thing. And I'm like, well, guess what happened? COVID happened. And so,
Mhm.
I definitely have shifted. I find it interesting because I think partially it's because of my parents. Um, they wanted to make me hyper aware that they were scared if I moved. And I wasn't going to move that far away. And so I was like, calm down. You're both currently in good health. They'd had cancer situations, heart attacks, and I'm like, okay, well, you've moved past that. You both are up, walking and moving about. And you just came off a vacation. And this is like in March, and I was like, well, I just got knowledge that I no longer have a job. Y'all are freaking out on me and I can't have that. And so I sat and had a moment. I mean, it took me unaware. And so through that random moment that they just curveballed, um, and it was pretty much just lock down, Ginger. Just lock down and wait for us to die, essentially. Wait till we need you, and then we'll holler at you. But in the meantime, stay put, do what you're supposed to do, be a good girl. I'm like, how am I doing any, what I mean? Like, what? Like, it just, you can imagine. I was blown and I stressed out that day. Fortunately, I have some good people, called godmother, talk to my mother-in-law, bless her heart. I have a super good relationship there. I know a lot of people don't. I'm super blessed right now.
You're
Can't
very
imagine.
lucky.
And so I was just like, what? And so I kind of threw it back at them after taking time and figuring out and coming back into, myself. And I was like, you know what? Okay. you know what? I'm not going to be locked down because you just can't. But currently, I can't. What am I supposed to do? I can't do what I used to do.
Mm.
So through that, boop, 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 here I am, and doing something. And again, really appreciate your taking this time with me. That I didn't think I would be talking to people, from Sweden, from Kenya, about India. I was like, not even, not even. And then I was like, okay, people, you want to throw curveballs at me? Let me throw curveballs at you. And then it became the silliest things because now I'm like, well, what do you want? What happens when you die? What do you want me to do about it? Well, there's some provisions been set aside, there's some planning, but I've been told to go to a file cabinet. Go to a file cabinet. Go figure it out. And I'm like, you want me to talk to who? I don't know that person. How am I supposed to, I'm your only now. How are you not giving me answers? So through not being given answers, I've, you know, explored my world and decided I'm going to
I think
find some
I think
answers.
that's a really important thing, right? We don't like to talk about death.
No, we
So
don't.
death is that next taboo subject that nobody wants to talk about, and yet we're all gonna die. So I will say something at the dinner table like, "Oh, I might be dead by next week. So what are we, why are we arguing about it?" And my whole family will go, "Don't talk like that." And I'm like, "No, I might be," because I'm very pragmatic about death, right?
Sure.
So having gone through what I've gone through, I realize that life is short and it's fragile. And who the hell are we kidding when we think we're going to be living forever? So, and I think we think and we'd like to think, actually, I really do not want to live forever because I think it's just an awful thought to be living forever. I want to have, I always say, I don't want to live a long life. I want to live a short, fun, fulfilling life. And I want my life, however long that may be, whether that be another week, another year, 10 years, or 30 years, it's got to have meaning. And
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
think that we're going to have time to create meaning
Right.
in our loved ones, that we love them. We think that we're going to have time to tell them all our wishes when we die. And actually, some of us get so sick before we tell them, or we die in a plane. My grandfather died in a plane crash,
Oh.
or a car accident,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you don't actually tell people. And so your family are left having to figure out what you want. Whereas for me, Jeremy and I actually, the last 3 days of his life, sat and he dictated his eulogy. He dictated his life so that his friend could write a eulogy about him. He told me where all his passwords were. He told me about all his bank accounts. He
Right.
told what hymns he wanted at church. He told me what readings he wanted. He told me what coffin I mustn't buy because it's too much money and it's going to go up in smoke. So he had the opportunity to tell me that, and that gave me a, 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 a kind of plan to
Yeah.
work with that was
Yeah.
really important for me, because I felt that I needed to do what was right for him. It was his funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make it the most, for me it was a send off. It was my final kind of goodbye to him. So knowing what he wanted gave me peace of mind. So I've done exactly the same. If you go to my lawyer, he's got my will, but also
Mm-hmm.
if you go, my assistant, I have a PA in the UK, and
Mm-hmm.
she knows where to go for all my funeral directions. So I have got my order of services done. I want this kind of funeral. I want people to wear this at the funeral. I want it to be a Bollywood party. I want it to be, um, if I was in an accident, for example, I do not want to be resuscitated. I do not want to be fed by a tube. So I
Right.
have all these things in place so that my mom or my sister or my current partner do not have to make those decisions on my
Mm-hmm.
behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to talk to people. And I think as people get older,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a conversation I'm thinking I must have with my mother. I have two moms, my mom and my aunt, who I call mom, who has brought me up really. And I need to speak to them. One's 83 and the other's 73. They're both widows. They've both lost their husbands in the last 2 years. They knew what their husbands wanted, so they were able to give that. But when they die, who knows what they want,
Right.
right? When I die, who knows what I want? So we must be open about these conversations. And interestingly enough, the end of life doula training does teach that.
Mm-hmm.
That how do you deal with this sensitively? Not everybody's pragmatic about death or as probably as crass as I am about death. So how do you do it in a sensitive way
Right.
without upsetting anyone? Because people, I would say that majority of people, a lot of people are scared of death. They're
Right.
frightened,
Yeah.
and it's taking that. You know, I'll tell you what's interesting. I'm not frightened of death. I'm frightened of dying. I don't want that long process of
Mhm.
a long,
Mhm.
painful death. So I know that, say, if I got terminal cancer, I wouldn't do the whole. I would be a dignitas in
Yeah.
Switzerland, and I would get it done.
Skip the chemo and all
And
that.
yeah, I would. It would be quick and fast. I don't want
Mhm.
that kind of. I'm going to eke every minute out of this
Yeah.
life. No.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, and one of the reasons too that I started when I started thinking about death in the, pragmatic sense, I was like, you know what it is? It's partially in my mind, in America, we've gone into gore, and we're in October, and it's the month of trick-or-treating, Halloween, and getting dressed up in costumes. Now, I find it hilarious how this current generation views costumes, because that's just funny to me. But it's something we've always grown up with, and it's gotten grotesque, it's gory, it's scary, it's horrific. And I think that's where people go, in the sense of death in general. And that's where they can't shift from, maybe this was a pragmatic thing to talk about, because back in the day, you might not live till you're 30. I mean, it's a given.
No.
Like by 30, if you're not dead, you're an old person at that point.
Mm.
Back in those good old days when all these things didn't exist, with getting your vaccines and whatnot. And so yeah, I think unfortunately there's that around what we've been fed for entertainment purposes that has kept people in a zone of ew, oh,
But I
and they
but I
just
think that's
avoid.
changed, right? Because I think COVID has brought our mortality into our faces, right? It's
Mm,
shown us just how vulnerable we are from this little virus that has taken over the world, and that it's made our mortality very real, I think.
yeah.
So I think in some ways, as much as COVID has caused huge damage around the world, it's
Mhm,
also woken us up that we
mhm,
are not as strong as we think we are as a species. We aren't in charge. We really aren't in charge. We have no
right.
control. That it could come and get us. We could be dead anytime. So perhaps we need to live more. And actually, I think what it has done is created connection more than ever before. A
Yeah.
bit like you said, that you would not have been on this call had it not been for the fact you lost your job. Well, you lost your job because of COVID. So
Mhm,
there have been certain things that COVID has brought to a highlight, that we are living this very fast, consumer driven, celebrity driven life.
mhm,
And suddenly it's come to a standstill like this.
yeah.
And actually, if you look at countries like America and the UK and a lot of European countries at the moment are really, really struggling.
Mhm,
And it's really brought it to the forefront that actually what really matters in life, well, actually, what matters in life is connection, it's compassion, and
mhm,
it's also having time for each other. We'd forgotten what that meant.
true.
Having time for ourselves, we'd forgotten what that meant.
Mhm,
And actually seeing life for what it is now. It is short, it is fragile, it is very precious. So let's try and live this life fully, and let's live it compassionately. And I think a lot of people have felt that. One of the things that kept coming out of in a series of interviews I did with people around the world with corona was, we need to be kinder to each other, we need to be kinder
mm,
to ourselves. We've kind of forgotten that. And I hope that now that in some countries things are going back to normal, for example, Kenya, it's fairly normal,
okay.
people don't get back on that rat race and
Yeah.
think, okay, back to normality. Because if we go back to normal, what is our normal, then shame on us, because
Mhm,
that means we'll
mm.
not have learned anything.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So you have been listening to part 3 of the 3-part conversation I had with Shalini of Just June. You'll find that in www.celebrationsoflifemagazine.com. under India. We were blessed with a conversation, and that was again Shalini, and she has been the author of 3 books. She created Just Jhoom, which has won many awards for Bollywood style dancing, and she was kind enough to share her thoughts, her opinions, and her circumstances as she has celebrated her life as a widow currently from the death of her husband. You'll see that in the article again under India in the www.celebrationsoflifemagazine.com, where we talk about India and we talk about the Hindu religion and how it relates to widows and widowers. And so I really appreciate you stopping by. I felt that this was the best way to wrap up the conversation. Parts 1 and 2 are typed out in the magazine you can find online. But as far as hearing thoughts and listening, I felt that this was the best way to wrap up part 3 so that you could participate as you go about your day. So thank you so much for joining us. This is Ginger with the Grief and Potluck podcast. Also check that out on YouTube. Again, you can find links to all this information on www.celebrationsoflifemagazine.com. And I look forward to hosting you again soon. This is the month of October 2020. Hooray! We've moved into the month of November, as when the conversation started, that was October, but now we're into November. Woo! Time is flying, people. We're almost wrapping it up. 2020 is almost over, but boy, does she keep throwing us some surprises. I can't wait. More fun to be had. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for your time. I look forward to having you listen again soon. Again, this is Ginger with Grief and Potluck Podcast. Information can be found on www.celebrationsoflifemagazine.com. Thanks so much. Hope you have a super duper day.